It's time for another conceptual aside. We've already talked about this a bit, but it's important enough to delve just a little bit into. JavaScript and undefined. We've already seen that there's this first phase of creating an execution context in which there's a global object for the global execution context. There's a special variable called this, which is always created. There's a reference or a link to the outer environment if there is one. And this phenomenon called hoisting, where variables are set up and functions as well. And in the case of variables, they're initially set equal to undefined. But what do we mean by that? Well, let's go back and make our example a bit simpler. I'll get rid of the function and the function call, and we'll just focus on the concept of undefined. So I'll just take my variable a, declare it, and then log it. I'll go ahead and run this in brackets. And we see the phrase undefined. Now remember, we already saw that if I don't declare it at all with the var keyword, it actually throws an error where it says a is not defined. But that's confusing because isn't not defined and undefined the same thing? Well, no, because when we say, and I'm going to put the var a back, in JavaScript, when we see undefined as opposed to that error, this isn't simply the word undefined, but it's actually a special value that JavaScript has within it internally that means that the variable hasn't been set. To prove that, I'll show you something. I'll do if a, I'm going to do triple equals. Now, if you've never seen triple equals before, we'll talk about that at length later in the course. But this is very similar to double equals, is equal to, but it's a bit safer, and we'll see why later. Just for now, we'll just use triple equals because this is good practice, and we'll explain why when the time comes. But for now, just imagine using triple equals anywhere where you would use double equals. All right, so triple equals, and then I'm going to say the word undefined. And then if it's undefined, I'm going to output a phrase. A is undefined. And then I'll put else. If it's not undefined, I'll put console.log a is defined. Notice that undefined isn't wrapped in quotes. This isn't a string. It's a special keyword. It's a value, a special value in JavaScript. And when I go back and run this, notice that a is undefined. So when this if statement checked if a was equal to this special keyword, this special value undefined, it said yes, it is. If I was to set a up here equal to a value, then by the time we get down here, a is set, and so a is defined. This was false. It was not equal to undefined. But if I don't set the value, again, this will be true because the initial phase of creating the execution context sets all variables equal to undefined. And if you don't do anything else, that's what that value will be. Notice again, this is different than if I simply never declare the variable var a and attempt to console.log a. When I refresh this, it gives me an uncaught reference error, a is not defined. That's because that initial execution context creation, that creation phase, when it went through, it didn't find a var a, so it never set up the memory space. So when it went to execute this code, it said, hey, I don't have a in memory at all. So it gave you an uncaught reference. A is not defined. I don't have it in memory. That's what the browser is saying. That's what the JavaScript engine inside the browser is saying. However, when I declare var a is placed into memory during the creation phase. So the execution context saw var a and set up a in memory. And so even though I haven't set it to a value, the JavaScript engine, which is doing more than what I'm just writing in my code, already set it to this special value called undefined. So undefined is not like empty or doesn't exist. It doesn't literally not exist. It's actually a value. It's actually taking up memory space. It's a special keyword, a special value that means this is the value that was initially set by JavaScript. And that leads to a little bit of a warning. Never do this. Never set yourself a variable equal to undefined, because actually you can. For example, I could set this initially to hello world, and then console.log it, and later for some reason set it to undefined, and we'll see that it is. Watch. Hello world, and then later it's undefined. That's perfectly valid JavaScript, but it's a little dangerous. It's better to let undefined, that special keyword, mean I, the programmer, never set the value. That will really help you when debugging code. If you make a habit of setting values equal to undefined, then it's really hard to tell if something is undefined because you set it or because the JavaScript engine set it and you never set it to anything else. It's always better to let undefined mean I've never set this value. That's really useful, and it will help you in your debugging. So undefined, this is a special value that is also a special keyword in JavaScript, and it's the value that variables receive during the creation phase. The first phase of creating an execution context sets up the memory of the variable, and in that memory space puts the value called undefined. I would have called it something else personally, like not set, but that's what JavaScript calls it, undefined. And if you don't in your code set it to anything else, that's what it will be. Or if you set it something else later and use it beforehand, that's what it will be. All right, so that's JavaScript and undefined.